Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Happy February. Can you believe it's the second month of the year already, Groundhog Day?
Happy
Excited to be back with
2023.
everybody. This is the first session you've been on. Welcome to our WellCents podcast. We do these on a quarterly basis. I'm one of your hosts today, Stuart Skolton. If I've had the pleasure of meeting you in the past for a consultation, glad you're back with us. I also have Brian, who I'll let him introduce himself in a moment here, but we changed the format up this time. So in the past, we've had some guest speakers on. We're going to continue to do that. But one of the bits of feedback we've been receiving from everybody is that you love the interaction. You love to be able to ask questions. And we thought that this time we want to really take the show in a direction that allows for more of an opportunity to engage. So if you have questions, we're going to pause from time to time and let you unmute yourself. Go ahead and ask those questions, because a lot of times we all learn together. And so I think that's a great opportunity. The one housekeeping item I do want to mention, we love kids and dogs. We don't want to hear them on the show here. So if you are not speaking or not called upon, please go ahead and make sure your line is muted. But with that, thanks everybody for attending. We're excited to be with you. And Brian, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, first off, thanks everyone for attending. We always say, time's everyone's most valuable asset. Obviously when we talk financial, we talk assets. So we appreciate you taking the time, and hope everyone's got a good start to their 2023. Personally, I became a dad 2 weeks ago for the first time, so I've been things have been a little different in my life this year. But good to have you here. As Stuart said, keep it interactive. We want to make sure these are valuable and educational for you. Obviously, a lot of you are joining from our retirement plans. Again, I've been an NFP almost 10 years, in the business 20. Board certified financial planner, and we're here to help you guys as often as we can. So we're going to make it more like Dave Ramsey podcast, Joe Rogan podcast style, just to kind of make sure we're engaging you and making sure you guys are grabbing the most out of this. So let me start with a market update. It's kind of a tale of two swords right now, right? I think we all saw big losses last year. I pulled up numbers just to kind of have them, but last year the S&P lost 18%. International was down 15-20%, but also bond funds were down 15-20%. And since 1926, stock and bond funds have been down twice in the same year before, 1931 and 1969. So it doesn't happen often. Crypto, for any people who do that was down 50%. Every single sector of the economy was down except for energy. So unless you were buying all energy stocks, you were down last year. And those years happen. But fast forward to today, as I mentioned, a double-edged sword. If you saw, Facebook's the best example. I'm looking up at my TV right now, but Meta/Facebook is up 26% today. So if you run through the year to date, we're up on the NASDAQ, which is basically tech stocks. We're up about 16%. But I just got to run through some of these crazy numbers. Meta's up 60 for the year. Tesla's up 60. Microsoft's up 9. Google's up 22. Apple's up 15. Amazon 53, and Netflix 24. So the big tech firms have kind of come back recently. And the issue is, well, Brian, what's causing that? Well, certainly a lot of layoffs. They're cutting costs. I know Amazon and Apple and Google are going to report earnings tonight, so that's going to be interesting. But we're going to kind of use that and talk about how that matters, what we should do. Should we change our investment? Should we adjust our 401k? How do we kind of mitigate all this volatility? And then, of course, we had the Fed come out yesterday and raise interest rates again. Now we're having the debt ceiling talk, because now I think last year the United States paid, I think it was close to 400 billion or maybe 300 billion in interest payments. And now with interest rates where they are, it's going to be $1 trillion a year in payments. So, we're going to talk about that a little bit. So let me throw it back over to Stuart. Stuart, what are you seeing clients do, with all the volatility? Last year was such a whirlwind. Now we got a good start to the year. What are people asking you? What are you telling folks about, how to kind of mitigate this volatility when they're investing?
Yeah, I mean, it really is a double-edged sword, right? And I think that's a great term to use because on one hand, you have people that realize, hey, I've got to stay invested. I think the industry that we're in has done a pretty good job of teaching people to stay the course. And I think people are realizing with access to more information, more tools, more reporting data, that, hey, you're not going to make money in the long run jumping in and jumping out of the market, especially when it comes to retirement planning, which is obviously near and dear to everyone, since most of your assets are really going to be in your retirement plan. But it's being able to weather that volatility. So seeing the drops last year, I think it's encouraging for people to see really the rebound, at least in the last 2-3 months. And I'm glad you brought up the tech sector. I know we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about it. A lot of those large cap growth companies, large cap value companies, organizations that were doing really well during the easy money years of COVID, when there was a lot of stimulus being pumped in, those really were hit hard last year when rates started to go up. And so as we think about what happens just in that economic cycle, layoffs tend to really happen. Companies get to really tighten the belt a little bit when rates go up. They're tightening things up, and so I think that rebound is really interesting. And hopefully, everybody stayed invested. I mean, that's what we tell a lot of our clients: is, hey, you really need to stay the course, because if you're jumping out of the tech fund that had a really bad year last year, a lot of times the bounce back is just as quick in the follow up year. So staying the course is something we're really emphasizing. If you're closer to retirement, maybe you were less heavy in stocks and your bond portfolio did take a bit of a hit. The silver lining is obviously rates are a lot higher. So we'll talk a little bit more about that with the Fed and some things that we're seeing with them continuing to raise rates. But at the end of the day, you're getting a lot more interest on your money. So as inflation does continue to tick down, that interest rate, that yield is going to be really attractive. So definitely some silver linings just as you look and navigate through a lot of the volatility.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I mean, for all the financial movies that are out there, you always hear follow the money. Where's the money going? There's all these articles that all the various news outlets of where the money's kind of flowing, and in the last couple of years we lived in a world where Bank of America, PNC, like Wachovia, all the hard-earned Main Street money that we all earned and we gave to the banks, they didn't give us much for it, right? They were paying us 0.5%, maybe 1% at best. And then they were going and loaning it out and making their money on the interest spread to, have a mortgage, give it out to mortgages and student loans and, private investment, things like that. So you're starting to now see that shift where in the past it was for clients, we could really take advantage of the low rates, refinance the house, refinance the debt. Now we've really shifted into, as you all probably see, we'll talk about the real estate market later in the call. But mortgage rates have really jumped, right? They're in the 6s and 7s. It's kind of disincentivizing people to buy homes. Home values really haven't dropped all that much. They're saying there's a lag in this in these Fed increases. So 6 to 18 months, the talking heads on TV, which I don't believe a word they say, but they're saying 6 to 18 months maybe before we see some of that inflation come down on things like food and housing. But we'll see if that happens. But now we're really in a world where refinancing is not really a thing. So two things so for some recommendations, things you want to be careful of: any variable debt you have. So I'm talking home equity loans, credit cards, things that can continually go up, 401k loans. Even though you're paying yourself the interest, it will balloon your payments. The Fed has made it pretty clear when Powell spoke yesterday, they're going to keep raising rates, and they're going to continue. I mean, they only did quarter basis point, 0.25% yesterday, but it seems like it's not slowing down. But so the refinance world's kind of gone. So any variable debt, be careful. You really want to try to attack that with as much prowess as you can. And then on the other side of things is check your money. Like a lot of personal clients of ours, just friends, family, see all this money in some of the big brick and mortar banks, your Bank of America's, PNC, and they're not paying anything. They give you some benefits, they give you points and different things. But if you're sitting money in a bank, fully liquid, mind you, and you're not getting 3-4% plus fully liquid, you have the bulk of your checking savings money in the wrong place. And there's lots of banks we recommend for our clients, FDIC insured, that do that. So we're kind of shifting to that space. So that's a very important takeaway, to make sure that you're doing those two things in this environment.
I'm glad you mentioned debt. A common question that I get from a lot of people is, well, should I focus on paying off debt, whether that's student loans? Obviously, there's the pause right now, but credit cards, any type of buy now, pay later type things we might have made purchases on. Do I focus on that, or do I focus on adding more into my 401k or my retirement plan? And so I think, for a lot of people, choosing that right balance is sometimes a little bit tricky. Obviously, when the market's doing really well, it's easy to think, hey, I need to put as much money as I can into my retirement plan. In a lot of cases, maybe you're getting a match, but you have the ability to really automate a lot of that. I think now where debt payments are what they are, and you have interest rates being significantly higher than they were a couple of years ago, now is really a time, as Brian alluded to, really focusing on paying down debt. So if you're thinking about, hey, maybe I got a raise, or maybe my financial situation's changed, what do I do with the extra little bit of money I have coming in this year? Focus it more on the debt side of things. If you are dealing with any type of credit card debt, any type of an interest payment that might be going up that's variable in nature, that's going to be really important. Something that's fixed, like more of a mortgage, and maybe that's less of a priority. But anything credit card wise, you really want to be focusing on 401k loans, things of that nature. Make sure you're getting out ahead of it. So I see some things coming into the chat here. Maybe we want to pause and just take a live caller here.
Absolutely, because we want to get you guys engaged here. So let's see. Let's like Jamali, I think it is. I saw you asking on some of those banks. Pop me an email. For compliance purposes, I can't kind of send them out in the group setting, but just pop me an email. I'll happily send you some of those FDIC banks that I use and I send clients to. Happy to do it. Let's see. So Kyler, in what instances would you advise not taking a debt consolidation or personal loan fixed rate to pay down variable debt? That's what you mean. You want to take that one, Stuart? That's a good one. That's a good loaded question. I could go a lot of ways on that one.
No, go for it, Brian.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're not for debt consolidation, when not to take it. I mean, first off, it depends like how much debt we have and where it's spread out over. I mean, right now it's all the interest rate game, right? Because if you have an interest rate, unless it's a 401k loan, you're paying the interest, you're putting money in someone else's pocket for interest. So it's all about literally just sitting down and doing the math. And then also looking at you like a business, right? Pretty much every single business has debt, like every one of them, right? They always talk about it on all the social media podcasts. You hear it all the time is debt has no tax. So if I go to Bank of America and I borrow $1 million, do I get a tax bill like I made $1 million from my tax returns? No, I don't pay tax on any of that. But if I make 100 grand, I get taxed at probably 25, 30%. So, you always hear some of the talking heads like a Dave Ramsey, pay off all your debt, never have debt. I'm not a non-fan. I'm a fan of some of the stuff and not the other stuff, but certainly there's good debt to have, to Kyler, to your point. So if it's like real estate debt, debts that are assets, even if it's variable debt versus 401k is an asset that has variable debt, even though the interest goes to yourself, it just depends. That'd be a good situation where you reach out to me specifically, and we can kind of, do a little bit deeper dive for you in that one. But I'll turn it over to Stuart if he has any more on that, and then we'll jump into some of those other questions.
Yeah, I think it really ties hand in hand with a great question that Leanne asked about, the best time financially to buy a house. And, that's a question we're asked a lot. I think real estate's something that's very interesting, especially when you think about just the ongoing demand for real estate. I mean, the reality is that, the baby boomer generation, white picket fence, that was a goal. We have a lot more millennials. I think the statistic I saw today is that half of kids between the ages of 22 and 30 are living at home with their parents right now. So there's a big influx of pent-up demand, whether they maybe couldn't buy a house, or maybe they're saving money to buy a house. There's going to be continued shortage of inventory on the supply side when it comes to real estate. So as the home building market is really trying to catch up to a lot of that demand, it begs the question, like, when is the right time to buy? Then I think really it boils down to your specific financial situation. When we talk about debt, that's really what you're faced with. Is it worth taking on the debt, buying a house, taking out a 30-year loan? If you can make the payments and it's not eating up too much of your disposable income, I think the conventional wisdom is you want to be in that 30 to 40% range max in terms of what you're spending on your living expenses. Some people will beg to differ on how much you should be spending on your home. But I think the reality is people nowadays are forced to spend a little bit more in order to maybe purchase a house. One of the things we talk to clients about is, the ability to refinance later. So if you did, meet all the requirements, you were putting a healthy down payment down in that, 15 to 20% range, and you can make the payments and it's not eating up too much of your budget, what you need to live on, then the reality is, taking out a loan now, maybe refinancing it later. If you have a sense of job security, where you want to be. It's a long-term investment like anything. So certainly a conversation that varies person by person. You want to make sure you are stable when you make that decision, but it's not necessarily a bad time to buy a house, but you're probably going to want to refinance later because rates are significantly elevated right now.
Yeah. I mean, real estate's always good. It's a hard asset, right? It doesn't move unless a hurricane or a tornado takes it out, right? Like it's a good asset to have. It's real, just like it's like hoarding, not hoarding, but it's like having gold or silver or platinum or whatever in your house. Those are things that are there's a finite amount of land, right? There's only so much good inhabitable build on-able land. So that's always good conversation. We'll talk about more about real estate if we have time about the market, but we would hope and think, and personally, if I had to guess, I would hope real estate, the prices would come down the next 3 to 6 months, 3 to 18 months, but we'll have to wait and see. But to Ellen's question, yes, this will be recorded. I sent you a note, and geez, you guys are doing a great job. I've already gotten like 10 emails. Send me some of these banks. So this is great. This is why you come here, to get this good information. So I'll get back to all these emails on sending you a couple good banks to mess with. So Gloria had a question here. I need understanding on my payouts on my husband's pension payout. We're about 6 years out. Gloria said, yeah, it's a great question. Pensions are a thing of the past. Stuart and I would tell you that. NFPs, I think we have 150 billion in 401k assets around the country, and we manage a lot of pensions. There's not many of them left. So anyone on the call who has a pension, you have to be very careful to dig into it. I spoke to a new client the other day. Him and the wife have a pension from universities. They're 62. They're going to retire in a couple of years. They don't know how they work, and they don't know any spousal continuation. That's not good that close to retirement. So that's something that we'd want to do. So I implore you, reach out to Stuart or I in an email, and we can do that. We can have our team do an analysis for you. Stu, you want to take one of these other ones? You guys are doing great with all these questions.
Yeah. So student loans, it's an interesting conversation, because right now with the pause, I think a lot of people did, they took advantage of that. They stopped paying student loans. Really look at the rates that you're getting. I think refinancing student loans right now with higher rates in the picture is probably not the best idea. So really understanding the loan that you're in, looking at what rates are going to be going forward now when payments are restarting, that's really what you want to look at. And I think the industry, just in general, the lending industry does a very good job of marketing itself, whether it's credit card consolidation, whether it's student loan consolidation. They advertise because, frankly, they can make a lot of money in a lot of cases if you refinance to them. And right now is probably not the best time to be refinancing loans that were taken out at a lot lower interest rate. That's just kind of my blanket statement across the board. So in general, make sure you're reading the fine print. Make sure you understand what you're paying right now as a percentage of the loan, student loan, mortgage, credit card, whatever it is. But then also just do the analysis on the other side of what you're paying, what you would be paying down the road, because it can be dangerous, especially if you're not planning on paying it off very quickly in terms of maybe a lot higher interest rate in the long run. So that's what I'd say on that.
Right, Stu. And then I know we talked about unmuting people. Do we want to try to do this for some of you guys?
Yeah. So
you guys are popping us so many questions. It's I just put me and Stu, my email and Stu emails in the chat there. So if we miss you, it's not on purpose. It's just there's a lot of great questions coming here, so we want to make sure we address them. And then also maybe we can try to unmute you guys and get you in here. Like Catalina, you asked a question about the housing market. If you want to unmute yourself and maybe ask that, maybe try to engage some of you guys, get you to talk and be more specific. Something about a crash of 2008. Where can I get a good CD or IRA? You want to unmute and be more specific?
Hi. Just I'd like to know if the house market is going to crash, so it is good time to sell the house now.
Yeah.
And also, I like to know a good CD for my daughter.
Where do you live? What market is your house in?
San Diego.
Okay, that's a great market. Stuart can probably chime in on this.
Yeah.
San Diego, San Francisco, these are really high-end markets. Obviously, if Stuart, I know the day if the housing market's going to crash, we'd love to know ourselves. But I don't know if Stu can give you his hypothesis on that. I would say we hopefully should have some downward pressure in home prices. It depends on the market you're in. San Diego, maybe not, but hopefully in the next 6 to 18 months. But that would be more, when the next crash will happen, I couldn't tell you that one, obviously, but where to get a good CD or IRA. Again, that's a good email for Stu or I. Send us an email. Like, we shop CDs all the time. CDs used to be much more advantageous 6 months ago. Now, so there's really two products. There's the insurance world products that are pure fixed annuities, and then there's the bank products that are the CDs that really kind of compete on rates. CDs were really good about 6 months ago. They couldn't beat the insurance products. Now the insurance products are actually kind of beating the CDs based on what rates are doing. So pop me an email and we can certainly send you some ideas of where rates are, but you should be getting like a good fixed annuity right now, you should be able to get around 5%. A good CD, like about a 1 year or 2 years, you should be able to get like 4.5. So a lot of these local banks are only pushing CD because that they only offer their suite of products. We can shop the entire marketplace. They're only showing you maybe some online, some brick and mortar banks might be giving you 2 or 3%. There's much better stuff out there. Sometimes banks actually run really good deals, and like the local banks, and we don't have access to them, and we'll just tell you that's a great deal. Go grab it.
Yeah, I mean, I chime in a couple things. Real estate's again an interesting thing. I think you want to try to avoid timing the market with anything. I have had conversations with a couple clients that are considering relocating, or they want to sell their house because maybe they're sitting on a lot of equity. There's a couple things to keep in mind. Selling your house does involve a lot of different transaction fees, right? Unless you're a real estate agent, you're going to pay a realtor between 4 and 5% to sell your home. That's coming directly out of the equity. You're also going to need to purchase or rent someplace else. So you're going to probably have a significantly higher cost of living in terms of where everything's gone since you've taken out your loan, if it's been more than a couple of years. And so factoring some things in like that, could be really important. I also talk to people that maybe want to, get out of the market they're in more than the fact that they want to sell their house. So I live in Southern California myself. I've had a lot of clients leave California. Obviously, it's a really expensive place to live. And one of the conversations we have is maybe consider renting your home out. Like, look at what the going market rate is for your property. It might even be worth hiring a property manager. There might be enough margin there to pay them so you don't have to deal with it. And, typically there's money left over. It's profitable to do that with a little bit of, finessing on your end, and then relocating somewhere else and maybe not buying right away. So there's different avenues that you can try, but it's not usually as easy as, hey, I'm sitting on this much equity. I'm going to go sell my house and take this money somewhere else, because you got to want to factor in the fees, the cost to take out new loans at higher interest rates. If you're going to be buying something new, all of those things would really weigh into the decision. So great questions. I think it's definitely a relevant topic. Looks like we got a couple other questions coming in. Brian, you want to grab one of these?
You grab one of those. Sorry, I don't know what my keyboard's doing. It won't stop. It won't stop entering the letter K, and I can't stop it. So you take another one while I try to fix this tech issue I got going on here.
Yeah. So Jillian, it looks like great question here. Better to pay off undergrad loans before taking out more for masters. Would it help lower potential interest rates for other loans? Showing ability to pay off the loan. So yeah, questions on higher education. So I caveat the higher education and the loan conversation with this. I do think in most fields, there's a law of diminishing returns when it comes to higher education. You want to make sure that when you're taking out loans, you understand the terms of the loans, what the cost is. And then you also want to make sure that you're getting a job on the other end that's going to substantiate the amount of debt that you're taking on to get that degree or that credential, whatever it is. So that's kind of how I try to picture for people, hey, the impact of taking out a loan for any type of education. That said, I think really you're looking at the debt payments. So if you've got an undergrad loan and you're making a payment on that, it's easy to say, hey, I want to stay in school, or I want to go get a master's, because it delays the payment process or the start date on when you have to start making those payments. If you take out another loan and go get a master's, you could potentially be really putting yourself in a dangerous situation, because then the loans are significantly higher when you come out with a master's. So without knowing too much about your situation, what field you're going in, what the income potential is on the other side, I would just caution you and kind of encourage you to take a look at the numbers and do your own break-even analysis. How much are you going to have to make at an average pay scale in the job that you're planning on coming out at? And what is that going to look like over time when you factor in the increased payments that you'd have for taking out a loan for a master? So that's what I'd add on that.
I fixed, I don't know what's happening. The number K just kept sprinting out of my keyboard. So I fixed that. Sorry about that, guys. So for the Stephanie had a good one for one-on-one consultation for your services, reviewing someone's current assets. Yeah, so obviously certified financial planners, we do a whole slew of things for clients, from helping them with the real estate to their investments, to their titling of their assets, and, investments, obviously, et cetera. So retirement readiness and retirement income planning is obviously a very big component of what we do, because NFP is a very big 401k provider. This is why most of you are coming to us from that type of avenue, if not maybe from some of you are from our group benefits and health insurance plans. But yes, that's the biggest thing is you can't grow wealth. Saving doesn't grow wealth, investing does. I don't know if you ever heard that before, but you have to make sure you invest. The stocks you pick, the asset allocation, all that stuff is really null and void in comparison to making sure you're investing continually over time. So yeah, that's something that we do for our 401k participants, is assessing your situation. You know, we don't charge extra for that. Our teams have the bandwidth to be able to do it. We just need information from you, right? We'll need statements and various things. But the one thing I find that most people don't know is, if you're on track for retirement, is how much do you need? We've talked about that in past WellCents meetings. Like, what's your number, right? Like, what income do I need? What lump sum do I need to be comfortable? I get there's other variables like health things that can come up and where I retire. But if we don't know where point B is, whether that's your, just like going into office and knowing what you need to get done, or trying to lose weight and trying to get to this weight, if you don't know what point B is, what income you need, you're never going to get there. Like, a goal without a plan is just a goal. It doesn't, you'll never get there. Like, every type of behavioral psychology tells you that, and most clients don't know. So we spend a lot of time sending people retirement workbooks and other tools we have to figure out what point B is. That certainly can change, but then we can from there back into how we, are we on track or not, and what adjustments do we need to make? So it's a great question.
I want to pivot a little bit and talk about Secure Act 2.0. So this is probably one of the more significant pieces of legislation that's come down the pipe in the last few years as far as retirement plans and just saving in general. It's going to really impact everybody in the long run, impacts what you can put into your retirement accounts, when you have to take it out by. So Brian, if you're good, let's kind of pivot over to that.
Sure.
Secure Act 2.0, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it really built on legislation that was passed in 2019. And it stands for the Securing the Strong Retirement Act. 2.0 really was an extension of some of the legislation that passed a few years back, as I mentioned. And one of the biggest changes to that was really centered around required minimum distributions. I think it really impacted a lot of folks that maybe were trying to save more or work longer into their 70s. It moved that age back from 70 and a half to 72. Secure Act 2.0 is now kicking that back to 73 for those required minimum distributions. And then it's also going to slowly, I believe, step back over to about 75 over the next 10 to 12 years. So it's an impactful piece of legislation. Brian, I mean, maybe elaborate a little bit on what people should be thinking about as they really navigate through this, because we're still unpacking it ourselves in the industry. I caveat this by saying that this is evolving.
Yeah, I mean, we like to Stuart and I were literally talking about this last night, because it's every financial advisor is getting you're drinking from a garden hose, if you will, on this Secure 2.0. All of NFP lawyers are on it. Like, as a planner, a comprehensive planner, I could use a lot of these rules and really do some comprehensive planning, like, because there's not a lot of detail in the rule. Like, I could kind of circumvent it in a legal way to really do some things. So to Stuart's point, some things are kind of hardened. Like, it is 73 RMDs. Business owners can now do Roth, Simple, and SEP IRAs. 401k employers couldn't match Roth dollars if you gave on a Roth 401k basis. Now they're able to. So there's some things that are set in stone, and some things that, to Stuart mentioned, are going to kind of bleed in over the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years from this act. And RMDs are anytime you're given to a pre-tax account, a 401k, pre-tax 401k, a traditional IRA, the government's still your business partner. So you have to pay him, and RMDs forcefully make, that's the government's way of forcing you to give you their tax dollars back. So understanding the rules is very important, because a lot of clients don't actually take from some of their accounts till they're 72, because it affects things like Medicare premiums and Social Security taxation and all these things that come into planning retirement income for folks to not pay as much in taxes as they otherwise would do with improper planning. So that's something that we're keeping abreast on. I mean, I assume you probably see stuff in the news. You probably get emails from NFP about this. But those are information, that's certainly stuff that we'll continue to keep you guys abreast of. Does the 73 age from Wendy, while I'm reading some of these things, apply if you're still working? If there's no RMDs if you're working, unless you're a 5% or more owner of that company. As long as you're still working, you can delay the money only in that 401k that you're working with, mind you. If you have some other IRAs, or old 401ks you're no longer working at, those still count. And then before I kick it back to Stu to take some of these, Miriam, I think, had asked again if she had some connectivity issues on the pension. So again, pensions, just in lieu of time and all the people, so we can try to answer questions. I would email me on that, because I would need to get your pension statements. But understanding when you get max benefit, is COLA, a cost of living adjustment, embedded? What kind of spousal options do you have? What kind of taxation comes out of them? These are all kind of guided by the pension document. So I would definitely get those in the statements. Pensions legally have to give you a statement once a year. and then we'll dig through them and see, that plus your situation, what we need to do. But obviously it's a very loaded thing. It would take hours just to do the analysis. So that's where I would start the process. Get the information, get it to us in an email, and we go from there.
Yeah, pensions are like dinosaurs. We kind of call them that in the industry sometimes. Like, they're out there. We know that they still exist, but typically we're not seeing a lot of organizations that are still offering a pension in the private sector, especially. So something to keep in mind. Getting a couple great questions on Roths. I know it's part of the Secure 2.0 with some changes to Roths there with the RMDs and maybe some lifting of some requirements. It's a little bit easier to even save money in the Roth for the long run now. You can definitely convert or roll over to a Roth from a pre-tax account. One of the things we just really try to emphasize with folks that are considering it is that there is a taxable event when that happens. So if you're thinking, hey, maybe I have a lot of pre-tax money, I'm concerned about where taxes are going to be down the road, I want to hedge my bets, I want to diversify from a tax situation and convert some of my money to Roth, you want to be aware that when you make that conversion, whatever year that is, that's getting added to your taxable income for the year. So it can potentially create a big tax liability. Obviously, in the long run, you care about the tax-free growth that happens after the conversion, but just doing it and being cognizant of the fact that, hey, it's going to change your tax situation is just going to be something to keep in mind. Roths, I think, are definitely going to be continuing. And I think that's a great question. They almost seem too good to be true. I think if you're really a super saver and you want to really grow your nest egg from a tax-free standpoint, as far as we're seeing right now, Roths are going to be around for a while. They're becoming mainstream in the 401k, the retirement plan world, where more and more plans are offering a Roth feature in addition to just a pre-tax or a traditional feature as well. So fingers crossed that they'll be around for a long time. It's definitely a vehicle that's seeing a lot of popularity right now.
Yeah, great. So lots of good questions coming across. Again, obviously just with bandwidth and being able to get back to you guys, I think some people were like, hey, email me this. We're not going to be able to have that dialogue. So just make sure, I've said it a couple of times in the chat, grab me or Stu's email. Just make sure to email us. We will get back to you. But if you put your email in there to expect an email, sometimes we may miss you with all the traffic. So we just want to make sure we get to you. So Judy asked a good question. Can you start drawing Social Security while you're working to pay down credit card debt? You certainly can, right? Like, obviously, like, credit card debt's one of those debts that you don't want unless it's.
132.
Oh, I'm sorry. Leah? I thought Judy was. Sorry, she muted. So yeah, Judy, I might bring you in here for you to give some more details, but before I do that, like, do you have to pay on tax on Social Security? Social Security is income taxable. As long as if you're filing jointly, I think it's only like 35 grand if that's your adjusted gross income. 85% of the Social Security check that you get is taxed. A lot of people don't realize that, but drawing Social Security and paying off on credit card debt, they don't affect each other. But having credit card debt with anything beyond zero interest is a problem right now. I mean, anyone in here that's got credit card debt, I would just guess on average your interest rate's probably 15 to 20%. So again, as I mentioned in the beginning of these, attack the variable debt, and get that money that's sitting in the bank in something that's paying 3-4% plus at this point, liquid. Again, you can look at CDs, some fixed annuities that are paying more, but obviously you're giving up some liquidity there, right? You're got to hold it for 6 months or a year or 2 or 3 years or whatever. Like, Judy, did you want to unmute? Did that answer your question? Does that make sense? And while I'm waiting for you to, okay, great.
Let's have Jenna unmute. I think this is a great question. Jenna, if you want to unmute, maybe ask your question about Roth versus pre-tax, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, I was just wondering, kind of generally speaking, under what circumstances it's recommended to take advantage of the Roth 401k option versus, the more traditional pre-tax route.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question because everyone's situation is different. So, we don't certainly recommend to everybody, hey, you need to do Roth or hey, you need to do pre-tax. Really, it boils down to, I think, a couple of things. Number one, when you're paying your taxes today with a Roth, does it make sense to do that? Because are you okay with, paying the tax up front? Like, are you looking for a tax break this current year? If that's not the case and you can bite the bullet, so to speak, and pay your taxes, definitely do the Roth. The other thing that I encourage people to think about is where are you at in your earning career, right? Typically somebody who's maybe at the beginning of their career, younger, they're in a lower tax bracket now than they might be later. And so the reality is, hey, why would I not want to pay my taxes today let all of that money grow completely tax-free, give myself the benefit of decades in a lot of cases of tax-free growth with the Roth. And so, that really becomes, I think, integral to the conversation. The other thing people can do is they can do both. So all these plans allow for you to put a percentage of your money in a Roth and also a percentage of your contribution in the traditional. So if you're not sure, or maybe you're thinking, hey, I'm just really looking for diversification, do a combination of the two. I mean, that's a really easy thing to think about. As far as the pre-tax option, the traditional 401k goes, if you're somebody who's really behind when it comes to retirement savings, typically you want to continue to go with the pre-tax option, because the reality is the way retirement plans were set up, many, many decades ago at this point, they were really built for people that were going to be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. The thought process was, hey, let's give people a tax deferred status because they're saving that money now into their retirement plan. They'll pay the taxes down the road when they're retired in a lower bracket. So if you're somebody who's playing the catch-up game, really you're maybe trying to make up for some lost time, or you think you're going to be in a lower tax bracket in retirement, or maybe move to a low tax state, right? From a state income tax standpoint, paying your taxes down the road could be a good idea. So to answer your question directly, find out which type of a person you are. If you'd rather pay those taxes today, if it makes sense, or do a combination of the two if you're not sure. But you have the flexibility. I personally do Roth. Being younger myself, I think Roth is a great thing to take advantage of. And then the other thing I'll mention is that anytime you are getting an employer match, if that's in the equation, that's always going into a pre-tax bucket. So even if you're contributing Roth out of your contributions, if there's an employer match, it is always going into the pre-tax option. So I'll close with that if that's helpful.
For now, 2.0, they may be able to match Roth dollars, but we'll see if they do it. But yeah, Jen, I don't want Stuart did a great job answering. I would say, high level speaking, normally people that are under 40, we do Roths unless they're really high income earners. Once they're over 40, 45 plus, pre-tax tends to make sense, especially if you take the tax savings from doing pre-tax. Let's say you save $5,000 on your taxes and reinvesting that money, and that's really you get the bang of the buck for that. Maria had a good question. Provide tips on a financial advisor. You go to cfp.net, go to broker check, make sure they don't have any disciplinary action against folks. But Stu and I would probably tell you, we're a little biased, obviously, been in the business as long as we have, but I look for an independent advisor typically. I got plenty of friends at New York Life, Northwest Mutual, and nothing against them. There's great guys and advisors over there, but they do make product, right? So you're always worried about somewhat of conflict of interest there. Like NFP makes zero product. We make no mutual funds, no insurance products, nothing. Our job is just to be a fiduciary, comprehensive planner for the client. So if I had to, Stu would probably agree with me, I would just say look for someone that's independent. There's no in-house product that they have to meet certain quotas for sales goals or something. We don't have any of that stuff here, and many firms these days don't either. What's the best way? Go ahead, sir.
A lot of similarities. I'd say also go just comfort level. In terms of, again, there's a lot of good advisors out there. There's also a lot of bad ones, like any profession. So finding ones that you can really trust. Look at the fees. Conflict of interest is what you're trying to eliminate. So to Brian's point, avoiding any type of commission kickbacks or things where there's product that advisor or shop might be selling is definitely important. But find that fit. Referrals can be great as well. Maybe talk to some other people and who they're using, but do your due diligence. Brian, you want to maybe talk to Adriana's question about the credit card debt, because I think a lot of people maybe are in that position right now.
Yeah. So, there's good debt and there's bad debt, right? Me or Stu or Ramsey or whomever, right? We're going to tell you credit card debt is not good debt, especially in this rising interest rate environment. You're just literally padding the pocketbooks of the credit card executives. So, but again, you got to get through life. We got to pay expenses. Things happen. Things break. We have children, things that will come up that maybe weren't planned for in the thing, and we got to pay it. So sometimes we end up getting into bed with credit cards a little bit. So a lot of times I see credit card debt. So people typically have a couple and they're paying it off the wrong way. They're paying the one that's costing them less interest faster. I know one of the things with Ramsey, him and I would argue all the time if we got on a podcast together, is he says pay the smaller ones off first, even if it's lower interest rates, because it makes you feel good. And you feel good. It's like going to the gym, you see small gains, you keep going. And that's fair. There's a psychological component to that, but he'd also be the first to tell you that, if you do it by the math, you will save more money paying it off the mathematical way and paying less in interest. So it's really about finding the right way to do it. And then a lot of people don't realize other assets that they have. I had a call with a 401k participant earlier, had some credit card debt, had about 80,000 or 401k, the credit card debt was only 10, but it was like 16, 17%. And she didn't realize she could take a loan and just repay herself back the interest versus paying 16, 17% or whatever it was to the credit card company. So obviously you'd much rather pay yourself than pay an executive. So it's a matter of looking at the client's overall situation, figuring out what the best attack plan would be. Great question though, because you want to go after that. That's not stuff you want to have when rising interest rates.
Yeah, so question from Lupe, I think was really good in terms of opening up an IRA, an individual retirement account. If your money's in a retirement plan right now, whether it's pre-tax or after tax, you have the option when you retire to roll that money out to another institution, through a use of an IRA, an individual retirement account. There's not really a percentage-based fee on the transaction in and of itself. So you don't need to be really aware of fees on the initial movement. Sometimes it's $25 to $50 for one institution to cut a check to send to the other institution. So there's not really a percentage cost on the transaction. You just want to do your homework and your due diligence of what you're paying at the new institution if you like to go that route. Yeah. So comparing really the cost between what it is to stay in the 403B or the 401k versus moving it to the IRA for the products, the investments, the services that you're getting over there is really what you want to look at. And cheaper isn't necessarily always better, but you certainly want to make sure you're finding value in what you're getting, depending on what you're paying. So I think that's what I would say on that.
I think I would piggyback that, right? Let's talk fees. Like, what's a fee, right? A fee is a cost for a good or service. That's what a fee is. So we obviously in our business, we're consistently in the question of like how do your fees work? And I can go over that briefly in a minute, but ultimately, like I have clients all the time. I give this as a prime example that, well, Bank of America doesn't charge me any fees. What are they paying you on interest? 1%. That's a fee to me because they're taking your money and they're investing it, making 10, 15% maybe somewhere, and they're making money on the interest spread. So you might not have a line item fee, but it's a fee if you had your money in another bank that didn't have a fee paying you 3, 4%, right? So a fee is always really dictated based on the value you're getting for what you're paying. So that's what you really want to look at, whether you're paying a doctor or someone to repave your driveway, or, in the example I just gave for like a bank, like what are you getting for it? Like a lot of times, like Robinhood was if you guys probably remember the whole GameStop thing with Robinhood, and I was like, well, Robinhood doesn't have any fees. Well, like, of course they do. But what they're doing is they're taking the trades and they're selling them to a third party, and they make money on the bid-ask spread of the trades. And it's just not really disclosed, and nobody reads the 100-page disclosure. So fees are very important to understand. To Stuart's point, you certainly don't want to be 25, 30 years old investing in stocks and paying 2, 3% in fees. That'll destroy you, right? Long term. But as far as like the value of getting for what you're paying for, I would tell most young investment clients, like our job, if we take them on as investment clients, our job is to keep the costs low because they got such a time frame. But when clients get into like the 50s, 60s, and they get into distribution, the fees tend to go up a little bit because we're doing more management to mitigate the volatility because they're actually drawing out, and that makes things a lot different versus just the growth phase. So we can always talk
Brian,
about.
I think to maybe elaborate on this, fees can come in a couple of different ways. So there are a lot of times advisors will charge an asset-based fee. So that's a fairly common fee structure. So you're paying a percentage of assets under management. Other advisors will have commission-based fees. So that's, again, we talked about that briefly earlier. I won't get too far into it, but you want to be aware if you're paying any type of commissions on a particular product that you might be purchasing. Make sure you're reading the fine print there. Again, NFP is an independent advisor. We're purely fee for service. So it's usually an asset-based fee based under the amount of assets that we're managing, and then the amount of planning that we're doing for a household as well, because that's ultimately what it boils down to. You're not just paying for the asset management, but you're getting value in tax planning, estate planning, other types of services that a CFP like Brian might be able to weigh in on it as well through the relationship. So there's value there.
And I got a few more questions, like, how you're like for asset management, just to kind of give you guys a rough number, like we're right around 1%, typically a little bit under that, up to $1 million. Then obviously it kind of tiers down, but a good website to go to, I'll tell some clients that aren't familiar with the business, they're like, oh, that sounds expensive. I'll send them to like Advisory HQ. It's like an independent third-party website of like all the National Financial Advisor fee averages. So we always try to, as an independent firm with much higher payouts, that's a whole nother conversation. We tend to try to make sure we're like just under industry average. And that's kind of where our firm sits with dealing with our clients. But then there's other ways we make money from, obviously, if we need product, right? If we need to get you insurance, if we need to redo your car and home insurance, or any insurance products pay commission, right? So that just, you don't pay for it. It just comes out of it's built into the premium of what you're paying for. Like if you need long-term care and we get that, it's built in, you just pay the premium you're going to pay as if you went directly to the carrier. So it just depends on the situation for the client and what we're doing for them.
Brian, I want to switch to one last topic here if we've got time, and it's really the focusing on people that are getting closer to retirement and how to maybe reallocate or rebalance in the current environment we're in. You gave the great market update. Rates are going up. Tech stock seems to be rebounding, but there's a lot of volatility just in the market, and we're seeing it both with foreign and domestic policy. You've got hyperinflation happening. You've got a war going on. How does a person who's nearing retirement kind of process all this and then ultimately bake it into an effective strategy to get them not just to retirement, which could be close, right?
Yeah.
But also get them through retirement. So I think that's a helpful conversation maybe as we kind of wrap up here today.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we've done like a retirement income one of these before, and with a lot of information. Maybe at some point we can do another one of those. And but I think this format is really good. But certainly blanket statement, if you're 10, 15 years away from using the money and you're saving and investing, as I just mentioned, from fees, try to stay low cost and stay invested. The biggest value of Brian, if I'm 25 and if I want to pay low cost, why do I need you or Stu? I don't want to pay that additional cost. The value of a good CFP at that point is getting you in the right stuff, but also making sure you don't get scared and get out like in the last year. There's like most statistics will show you there's like a 3 to 4% return spread in like Vanguard studies and such of a good financial advisor is kind of talking you off the ledge, if you will, right? In those kind of years. But to Stuart's question, once you get to that like 5-year window, if you're 10, 15 years away, stay stocks, close your eyes, and make sure you're constantly investing, especially in years like last year. But once you're within 5 years of using the money, you have to be much more optimized. So let's say a portfolio of $1 million, I need 50 grand a year, AKA 5%. How do I efficiently draw that out? Well, you definitely don't want it in all stocks and bond funds in a type of 401k platform where you have to take from every fund because you're going to have to take those losses. So we tend to move it into the IRA space where we can build bond ladders. So we get rid of the interest rate risk. We go to more dividend paying stocks, which are more recession buffered, if you will. Last year, dividend stocks did like -7 on the index when the market was down 20. But also if you own the stocks, we can collect the dividends, collect that rental income, and we start to use that money, take the bond interest, take the rental income. So it gets much more detailed in the retirement years. So we're not hurting ourselves, because ultimately, I always tell this to clients is your worry now is to getting as much than you need to retire. And then as soon as you retire, your worry is not running out of money. So we got to make sure we have a plan in place 5 years, at least 5 years prior.